Hello, Ms. Brendan. I wanted to get your strand reading information to you as soon as possible. I'm trichologist Lisa Ackberry, and as you can see here at the top, I'm going to offer you a link right here, a private link and it may be a part one and two. It depends on how long this snagit is on viewing this. So no one else will be able to view this information except you and anybody that I assign to my technician on my team. In other words, it'll be on YouTube, but no one else will be able to view it. With that, let's get started. All right, one of the first things I wanted to show you is your the two parts that you're going to work with. You're going to have information that I'm going to go over with you, and then we're going to have information that images. I'm going to show you some of your strands, microscopic views, so that you can understand more about your strand and what's really going on with each and every strand. Just to sum it up, basically I found your hair texture to be medium with texture changes to fine, and this is based on the strands that you sent in. Kinky, medium, and to extreme. And then you had poor elasticity, which means you lost the ability of the strands to stretch without breaking. Poor porosity, your hair was extremely dry and dehydrated, as you see underneath. Porosity and dehydration kind of comes together. Poor porosity just says that you have lost your ability to retain moisture. You can draw it in, but it does not stay. It literally dissipates and dehydrates. Layer peeling, I'm going to explain that when we get in front of the images. Layer peeling is basically where we're looking at the layers, the top layers falling away and peeling and separating from the strand, as in strand separation, groups of layers peeling and separating from the strand. There were pollutants on your strands. I found cosmetic pollutants, old hair products. That means you're shampooing with hydrating shampoos, which don't really clean, and certain particles stick to the strand. So you'll end up with this buildup. And that buildup is problematic for several reasons. One reason is because it won't allow conditioners to go into the hair. Conditioners that may repair the hair, but it won't allow it because that waxy buildup is on the strand. The other reason, it could also create blockages around your follicle. I noticed in some of your pictures you showed some forms of alopecia, and we're going to address that in a minute when I talk about the categories. But pollutants can solidify around the mouth of the follicle, and depending on the size of the actual strand, texture in other words, and how dense the pollutants are, that can determine whether or not you actually are able to allow that hair to emerge from your follicle. Unnatural texture changes. That means that one part of your strand was one size, the other part got smaller. So that was not natural. That's something that happened because of things that happened to the surface of that strand. It could be detangling, over manipulating, in other words. It could be harsh chemicals. It could be things like I mentioned the brushing. It could be heated tools, anything that's on the surface of that strand, keeping that cuticle layer peeling, strand separating, could cause an unnatural texture change. So the strand will start to get smaller in diameter, and I'll show you that as well. Exposed cortex, that falls right under poor elasticity. When your cortical fibers, which is the strength bonds, and I'll show you those, are exposed, you will find that your strands will be weak and you will break easily. Enlarged cortex, we find that in many cases when the cortical fibers are about to become exposed, but initially the cortex just begins to swell inside the actual strand. A lot of this will make more sense as we go into the actual analysis and showing you those strands. Now, Ms. Brandon, with the amount of strands that you sent, I cannot be sure this is the condition of all the strands on your head, but your strands have an unnatural texture change which appear that in part you have developed a form of hair loss is called short hair syndrome. And I did put a link on here. If you click on that link, you'll be able to get to my website and it'll go right to short hair syndrome. And that will give you information about short hair syndrome as well as follicular epidermis alopecia, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit as well. Okay, so we're going to go back to your images. And so now, I just want to talk to you about the categories of hair loss. When you showed me images of hair loss with the strand samples, you also showed me images of hair loss as it relates to balding. So there are two categories of hair loss. There's internal and external follicular loss. When you lose hair or have alopecia or baldness, your hair hair loss comes in within an internal uh, type of malfunctioning of the follicle. So what happens, this can be developed through genetics, hormones, diet, disease within the body systems, medication, illnesses, and nutrition. That is very internal. That would show villous hairs. It would also show which are hairs that lack color, length, and texture, meaning they're very small. And then there could be also resulting in something like male or female pattern baldness, but that's an internal follicular type. There's external. External is what I can treat as a trichologist. That's when the hair follicle, most likely is functioning as it should, but it malfunctions right at the mouth of the follicle. And there's sometimes you can have a first or second degree skin damage. There could be ingrown hairs or blockages. And blockage is one of the big things that I find within my clinic. This all can be detected and diagnosed with a hair and scalp analysis. I sent you that link on short hair syndrome, and short hair syndrome is going to be part of the information, but also we're going to learn more about follicular epidermis alopecia and whether or not FEA is the type of alopecia that you may be suffering from. So we want to look at that as well. So I'm going to go back to this image, and then I'm going to show you some of my strands because I'm going to make some recommendations for you. So let's go to your strands and let's take a look at those. Okay, we'll start with this photo. What I see here, it appears to be what we call density inconsistencies. So you know that the hairs per square inch appear to be changing. You have less hair. So that's one indicator that there may be a form of alopecia developing. The same with this image. You can see the Christmas tree type part or inconsistencies in the part developing these circles. So that would be a form of alopecia. Now, when I looked at your strands, which is what I can do when you mail things in, I can't obviously put your scalp under the microscope until you get here, and I use a handheld microscope or you visit a trichologist in your area. Now, let's start with the strands. The reason I was able to determine that short hair syndrome was apparent is because first I noticed something called webbing and stress points in the strand. So when your hair becomes tangled, there's a process. The first thing that you will notice is that the hairs on the right side of the part and the hairs on the left side of the part start to cross over that part, and so you can't really take your fingers through. Once you try to detangle that, you begin to see these little balls on the end, so they start to blend with your natural shedding and they just start to lock. So really it starts out with webbing, then you create tangles and stress points and locking. So that's why the hair will break, because hairs do not have the amount of elasticity that will be required to detangle this hair, especially in cases like yours where there are tears. So let's take a look, and this is the sample bag that you sent. So we're going to look under this lens, and let me try and blow this up a little bit. This is a 50X, and one of the things that we're seeing, let's bring that up a little bit and see if it'll stay for me. What you see here, and we're going to use a higher level of magnification, it's layers peeling. Remember I mentioned the layer peeling? This is a part of a strand. Those layers are peeling off and they're slowly peeling away in those stress points, these are the webbed areas and the stress points, and the elasticity was lost because tears from detangling, and the hair broke away. And it could have been from other things, but right now we know that short hair syndrome is developing. Let's get your next image. So we're going to pull back a little bit and show that exposed cortex, enlarged cortex, more layer peeling, and strand separation. So what happens, your strands just basically lost the amount of elasticity required to hold itself together, so it broke away. Here you can see that layer that peeled off of that strand, and also we're beginning to see some of those cosmetic pollutants. Let's go a little closer so that we can clearly see. When you have more transparent flakes on the hair or scalp, that would be an indicator that that's probably skin pollutants, so that's maybe a form of dandruff. But when you see the chalky, which mostly what I see on your strands, it indicates that that's hair products. And those are products that may not be clean products. You also may have some environmental blended in there as well. Now, let me go back to what I mean by clean products. That means you have most hydrating products that will make the hair feel soft and detangle, but it won't clean. So residues and traces of that product is left on your strand. So you always want to get a squeaky clean, which is what our clarifier does. Let's move on to here. I want you to see an enlarged cortex, strand separation, and how it just breaks away. So this is why I initially diagnosed short hair syndrome. A solid strand, layers are beginning to peel off of that, and it just slowly peels away like peeling a banana on your strands. It just peels and peels, and then it just peels away until the strand is so small, and you can see it here as well as the pollutants. The hair actually just loses the amount of elasticity required to hold it together. So you can see here how there was a solid strand and it just peels away. Part of it will break away and then part of it stays. So when you look at the strand, it's hard to determine that this is not a full strand. But as you can see, it did leave this part of the strand, and look what has stayed, but this part broke away. And it'll just continue to peel until you only have this portion, and then after that, your strands look thinner. And that's what has happened with your short hair syndrome. So let's go back to my recommendations. So my recommendations for now, I'm recommending that you purchase and follow a custom program. Now, this program will help your weak and dehydrated hair, as well as the breakage or possibly some of the thinning. And the reason I mentioned the thinning, because some of that thinning may be stemming from some soft blockages, and your hair will begin to emerge from those follicles, maybe some ingrown hairs. Without viewing your strands under the microscope, it will be very hard for me to be 100% sure that this type of alopecia is here. I highly recommend that you read my book to help you to understand more about both categories of hair loss. Every Woman's Guide to Beautiful Hair. The next option really will be to come into the Institute in Memphis, Tennessee, to have a microscope and physical hair and scalp analysis. I'm going to send you this information. This is a 7-week program that I'm recommending. I'm also going to recommend that you think about cyber consultation. If you go on, click this link, it just gives you an opportunity to have a cyber consultation with me. You just click that on, and then I will help you to get some times. My assistant actually will do that to get on my appointment book so we can have live consultation, and you'll also get a video of that. So for now, I'm going to send this to you. If you have any additional questions for me, please don't hesitate to email me, and I will answer those questions about this particular reading. Thanks so much. You have a wonderful, blessed evening.